Hello and thank you for joining Era of the Unprecedented VideoCast. My name is Khaled Fattal. I am the producer of the VideoCast and of the investigative program, as well as the chairman and CEO of the MLI Group. Today I will be leveraging the expertise of the MLI Group in this space of geopolitics at local, regional and international levels to address a topic that is very personal to me, and I will describe to you why it's personal. The topic is the Beirut explosion last week, the resignation of the government yesterday, and ponder the question, is an international cover-up underway? Now, before you start thinking what I'm going to be talking about, let me just be very clear. For the purpose of disclosure and for the purpose of being authentic, I need to inform you of a bias that I possess. And I'm hoping that my bias will be removed. I would aim to remove that bias in the way I analyze, I assess, and I conclude or provide ways forward. And let me start by my bias. Some of you may know that I was born in Syria. I'm also a resident of the West and a citizen of the West. But I also claim to be Lebanese. And I use the word claim because it's probably the most appropriate word. I'm not Lebanese, I'm not officially Lebanese, but I claim to be Lebanese, and I'll explain why. From the early days when I remember ever opening my eyes and noticing anything, I think I was about maybe 4, all I remember is Beirut. I was raised in Beirut. I was raised in Beirut at a time that could be described as the golden era of Lebanon. Why do you think this is relevant? Why am I bringing this into the conversation? Because the message I want to bring to you is 2 reasons. One, I'm speaking in English, not in Arabic, because the message is also aimed at Western citizens, those who live in democratic institutions. To some extent, some of them are allegedly democratic, but in democratic institutions where it is in your name, virtually everything that happens internationally gets labeled. So if it's in your name, you need to stand up and recognize what is in your name and what is not, because you value democracy. Plus, to the Lebanese people, I have a reason why I want to talk to Lebanese people, and this is why I claim to be Lebanese. What inspired me, let me put it this way, when the explosion happened, the Hiroshima-like explosion happened, I really felt for a moment a total sense of despair. I'll be very honest with you. Although I've been living in the West more than 40 years, I left a sense of hopelessness for Lebanon, and it pained me. And this is why I was conflicted on whether I want to talk about this professionally or not. But then, hours later, I started seeing an amazing manifestation of the quality of the Lebanese people. The youth who rushed from all corners of Lebanon with brooms in their hands and help, and they started helping their fellow citizen on the ground in Beirut, not asking what sect you're from, what religion you're from, what political affiliation are you of. They came in to help. And my message to that youth is, you are the power that will change Lebanon. And I'll tell you how. By showing your sense of social responsibility, by being responsible in your action, you show the world and yourself how Lebanon will come back, but will come back better. Because, in all honesty, the older generation delivered an absolutely cancerous Lebanon to you in a system that is of unprecedented level of corruption. And that corruption, incidentally, has been permitted by the watchful eye of the West. So let's just keep it in perspective. So, why I also claim to be Lebanese? I am a student or a product of المعهد الأنطوني في بعبدة. I'm a student of Lebanon. المعهد الأنطوني بعبدة, the Collège des Pères Antonins, the school I attended in Lebanon, just to put it in perspective, ladies and gentlemen, and to my Lebanese brothers and sisters. From the age of 7, I believe, to high school, baccalaureate, every student on weekly basis, had to attend cinema classes. Imagine, 8-year-old, 7-year-old, 9-year-old, watching spaghetti westerns, watching thrillers by Alfred Hitchcock, having playwrights and directors coming and talking to them, inspiring us. Ladies and gentlemen, I am a product of Lebanon. I am a product of that education system, that Lebanon, that hub of intellectualism. I used to argue with friends of mine in the West, Westerners, who used to say, oh, you were in Lebanon, my God, fantastic. Oh, Paris of the Middle East. I used to tell them, please don't insult Lebanon. Lebanon is not a holiday destination only. It is not in Las Vegas. Lebanon was the hub of intellectualism and thought leadership of the Middle East. This is the Lebanon the youth must aspire for. And it cannot happen unless they act responsibly, not to allow themselves to become the fuel for whatever civil unrest takes place, in whatever shape takes place. So, with that qualification that I am biased, that I only want the best for Lebanon because it is personal to me, I'm going to try and remove my bias as best as I can. And if any of you notice that I'm being biased, please feel free to reach out and let me know. I can take criticism, constructive of course. I call on you to actually recognize this is how great Lebanon was and what it's capable to be. So with that in mind, let's address the issues at hand. Fundamentally, we need to determine, and this is key, these are fundamentals, ladies and gentlemen, we need to determine, aside from the corruption that allowed for the 2,700 tons of ammonia to be there in storage on the port. That's Lebanese corruption. It has to be dealt by the Lebanese. The question that must be asked and must be resolved factually is, was it an accident or was it caused or perpetrated by a third party? The facts are, it's not easy for ammonia to just explode by itself. It needed to be ignited. Ladies and gentlemen, here I'm going to start talking about why I'm starting this episode from the angle of, is an international cover-up underway? So let's go through the facts that we know. President Macron rushed to Lebanon within 48 hours. By that time, it is conclusive in my opinion, my professional opinion, that the superpowers in the West and let me rephrase that. The superpowers, period, already know if it was an accident or if it was perpetrated by a third party, such as a missile by Israel. They know that. So the question we need to ask ourselves, is it possible? Is it plausible that it was a missile and now the West is trying to cover up? Because when Israel normally attacks targets in Syria, in Lebanon, in other parts of the world, they claim it and they justify it as self-defense, because the damage is usually controllable to allow for the narrative of being an act of self-defense that Israel can promote and its allies in the West can actually continue promoting through its media. But when you get an explosion that is of a Hiroshima-like scale, that cannot be sold as an act of self-defense if it was truly, and it can be proven, that it was a missile. So is it possible that Israel miscalculated, attacked the port, thinking it was a surgical strike, and then it ended up being this huge manifestation of catastrophic nature? Is that possible? If it is possible, would that explain why President Macron rushed to Lebanon within 48 hours And aside from the standard analysis are to block the Chinese from coming in because they offered to rebuild the port and finance it, etc., which is understandable. Is it possible that he came in and because he actually did meet with the representative of the Hezbollah group in the Lebanese parliament, Mr. Mohammed Raad, and in the 7 minutes they exchanged, is it possible that a message was sent to Hezbollah and the resistance in Lebanon to say, please do not respond. Be patient. We promise to bring change that will be to the benefit of Lebanon. Be patient. Now, if you think I'm purely speculating because I'm smoking something, let me back this up with another observation that I made that I believe can actually substantiate that this could have been one of the messages and the reasons why Macron came to Beirut. In his speech on Friday, the leader of Hezbollah, Sayyid Hassan Nasrallah, was very measured in everything he talked about, whether you like it or you dislike it, or you like his policies or you don't like his policies. Read what the man was saying. He talked with great detail about an investigation to determine what actually happened. He never mentioned once the hypothesis that it could have been a strike. In fact, as the leader of the resistance in Lebanon, he could have, which is his habit, by the way, could have addressed the supposition of, if it were to be proven as a fact that Israel did attack the port, then the resistance has the right to respond, and then you could have expected him to use his finger and warn what will come out next. None of this was addressed. That tells me the measured and tone of the response and not addressing the probability or the plausibility of the attack may have been by a strike from the Israeli Defense Forces meant to me that it's very possible that the resistance in Lebanon was responding positively to the Macron initiative to calm things down, to discover what's going on. This, ladies and gentlemen, would be built on the premise that the French, the Americans, and their allies, and the British, and that would be, by the way, the Russians and the Chinese would also know this, know exactly what happened. It's not public information being disclosed, and anybody who want to quote official intelligence sources from the West about the lack of evidence or anything like this, let's ignore this, because we've already seen numerous times in recent history how intelligence services make announcement of something and it turns out to be manufactured online. The list is too long. I'm not going to list them all. Iraq, weapons of mass destruction, blah, 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 and many others. So, if you also notice, the message by Sayyid Hassan Nasrallah on Friday also included another message. If you recall, he talked about that there is recognition or convergence on the acceptance of the Lebanese army as an institution that virtually all conflicted parties in Lebanon would agree is a noble and respected institution and can conduct the investigation. In fact, he mentioned that the investigation should be straightforward, whether it was or wasn't. It shouldn't take more than a few days. And if I recall correctly, I think he used the word 5 days. Subliminally, ladies and gentlemen, if the Macron message was to calm things down, and readers of history know that Western plans and commitments don't last very long, it is very plausible that the calm tone of the leader of Hezbollah and his statement that it should not take more than 5 days was a public statement to the French and the West. There's a deadline of 5 days. We will wait to see what happens. Show us your true colors and we will be willing to work with you. Well, listen to what happened in the middle. The Lebanese government resigned. This is, I think, this is where it's hypothetical. I will grant you that. If the proposition I'm speculating on, that Israel may have miscalculated in an attack on the port, and then it rushed all of its allies to show its love to Lebanon and with desire to help, and President Macron reaching out to Hezbollah and the resistance in Lebanon to say, please calm it down, we want to help Lebanon. And there was the reciprocation by the leader of Hezbollah to say, okay, fine, we will not agitate things, we will stay calm, but you have 5 days to come up with the true colors. In the meanwhile, the government collapses. Ladies and gentlemen, it is very plausible that the government in Lebanon also knows what happened, also knows that this probably was not an accident and may have evidence to that effect. So here's now the supposition I have to ask myself. Is it plausible that the government was being asked to actually accept an outcome that is not factual? Now, knowing what I know of some of the members of the Hassan Diab government, and some of the ministers who I know for a fact are exceptionally honest and uncorruptible. I can tell you that for a fact. I do not know Mr. Diab himself, but based on their acceptance of being in their government, in his government, that they would actually recognize him to be a man of integrity. So, is it possible that the Lebanese government was being asked to actually accept a narrative outcome that would resolve the issue and conclude that it was an accident? And because it was asked to do something that is unconscionable, that would require being silent on injustice, it decided to actually resign. Is that possible? I do not know. But is it worth considering? Most definitely it is. Because it does not make sense to me that the West, that has put an absolute stranglehold on Lebanon economically, to channel the anger of the people, the justified anger of the people, for corruption of 30 years, now all of a sudden wants to be its love and affection, and is willing to tolerate Hezbollah, who is listed on the list of the Western list of terrorist groups and many of its members. This does not reconcile, ladies and gentlemen. So with that in mind, I caution Western citizens to stay vigilant on this space, because the stories you get told in the press are seldom the truth of what is being aired and planned in the name of its people. And in Lebanon, I caution of the Lebanese to actually be exceptionally responsible, because the ramification of what may turn out to be fact, and I hope it will not be the case, by the way, let me just be clear, would be a level of instability that will not only remain local or regional. This will impact the entire globe, ladies and gentlemen. And if you recall what happened in Syria for 9 years of civil war, and how the West only started looking at what needs to be done to create a political resolution in Syria, it's only because we saw the migrant crisis hitting the European land. So with that in mind, I will conclude this particular episode, and I will leave you with these thoughts, because the episode with part 2 that will come, I will go into greater detail as to what evidence we have, or what could be ascertained based on what we have coming out from the unfolding events in Beirut, and notwithstanding possibly 90% of what I call parasite information that just create nothing but a distraction. I think we need to keep our eye on our ball and identify what happened, who did it, and allocate the responsibilities moving forward. As it stands, Lebanon is on the brink of a decision or determination where they go, and The responsibility of the international community is to actually come clean and tell us the truth. Because if the West knows, if the intelligence services in the US, France, or Britain do know what happened, and they keep it silent, let's just be clear, they're not the only ones who know this. Other superpowers know this, and it could come out at a later time, and justice will always be demanded. So let's remain calm to determine what happens, but keeping an eye that it's mostly unlikely for resolution to come without the price being paid by the local people, which is our people. So stay smart, stay vigilant, and until the next episode, I bid you farewell, and I ask you to stay safe, and my prayers are with you. Until then, see you next time.